Before they gave it a name, they gave it a verdict. And the verdict was simple: impossible, not unlikely, not premature, impossible. The word engineers use when they have decided something should not exist. Quebec, 1876, the province that winter owns, a place where snow does not visit. It settles, it stays, it buries. Into this world, on December the 17th, a child was born in Saint-Léonard-de-Port-Maurice. His name was Arthur Sicard. Arthur grew up with winter, not watching it from inside, working inside it. He understood cold the way farmers understand soil, personally, physically, with his hands. He knew what winter cost. He had paid it every year of his life. In 1894, Arthur Sicard was 18 years old. He stood watching a grain thresher at work, blades rotating, pulling, separating material by force. And something shifted in his thinking. Not a sudden flash, a quiet question. What if that same rotating motion could move snow? 2 years later, in 1896, he began building prototypes. Crude, imperfect, but deliberate. He was not guessing. He was testing a theory, one that every observation of the grain thresher had convinced him was sound. The problem was convincing anyone else. He approached engineers, men with credentials, experience, authority. He spread his drawings across their desks. He explained the mechanism. He answered questions, and then, reliably, consistently, they shook their heads. The rotating blades, they said, would jam in heavy snow. The metal components, they continued, would crack in Canadian cold. Time equals 550 milliseconds / greater than the temperatures Quebec reached, -30, -40, would make the mechanism brittle. And even if it didn't crack, the machine simply couldn't generate sufficient force. Theoretically unsound, they said, impossible. Arthur Sicard went home. And he kept working. This is the part of the story that history tends to compress into a single sentence. The 31 years between 1896 and 1927. 31 years is not a sentence. It is a life. He approached banks. The loan requests, they said, were impossible. The business plan had no precedent. The market did not exist for a machine that did not exist. He approached investors. The word came back the same way it always came back: impossible. He spent $40,000 of his own savings in an era when that sum could purchase land, a house, a future. He spent it on metal, on machinery, on years of testing in the cold that everyone told him his machine could not survive. What sustained him was not optimism, it was evidence. Every test run taught him something. Every failure narrowed the problem. He was not a man who believed in spite of doubt. He was a man who worked through it, methodically, season after season. The Canadian winter was his laboratory. He tested in blizzards, he tested in ice storms. He tested when temperatures dropped low enough to freeze oil in an engine. Each winter, the machine came closer. Each winter, the word impossible became less accurate. In 1925, 29 years after he began, Arthur Sicard completed what he called the Sicard Snow. Remove a snowblower. He was 49 years old. His savings were largely gone. But the machine worked, not theoretically, actually, completely. It threw snow 90 feet, not a few feet, 90. It operated in extreme cold. The same extreme cold engineers had assured him would destroy it. It handled packed ice. It worked during blizzards. Everything impossible was now demonstrably, verifiably true. Now, he needed only one thing. He needed someone to watch it work. In the winter of 1927, he arranged that. Montreal and Outremont officials received an invitation. Come and watch, it said. Watch the impossible machine that isn't impossible anymore. They came during a storm. Not ideal conditions for a demonstration of a machine built specifically for storms. The streets of Montreal were buried. The officials stood and watched. And the machine moved into the snow. And the snow moved. Hours, not days, hours. The streets cleared in hours. The officials who had come prepared to be skeptical stood instead in silence. What had been described to them as impossible had just operated flawlessly in the worst conditions the city could provide. The label changed on that street, in that storm, in that hour. Montreal paid $13,000. Outremont paid $13,000. Not after deliberation, not after committees, immediately. The word the city used was not revolutionary, not yet. The word was essential. $13,000 in 1927. To understand what that number meant, consider this. It equals roughly $224,000 today. 2 cities, 2 machines, $448,000 worth of belief acquired in a single afternoon. Word traveled. The cities that had watched from a distance, the same cities that had called his patents premature, his ambitions excessive, began writing letters. Orders arrived, not requests for proposals. Orders. The machine no one wanted was suddenly the machine everyone needed. Newspapers found the story, and newspapers, unlike engineers, understood what had happened. They wrote about Sicard's revolutionary invention. They described what he had built. They told their readers about the 31 years the word impossible had already been retired from the conversation. In September 1929, Arthur Sicard founded his manufacturing company in Montreal. He was 52 years old. He had spent over 3 decades proving a single idea. Now he would spend the next decade scaling it. The farm boy, time equals 400 milliseconds / greater than had become a manufacturer. Through the 1930s, Sicard manufactured dozens of machines annually. Cities across Canada ordered them. The language around him had completed its transformation. Innovative, groundbreaking, transformative. Each word a further distance from the one that had followed him for 31 years. The horse-drawn plough was disappearing. The Sicard machine was replacing it, not gradually, but categorically. Cities that had relied on teams of men and horses for generations discovered abruptly that winter could be managed differently, that it could be managed at all. By the 1940s, Sicard snowblowers were operating across Canada and the United States. The machine engineers had declared impossible was now classified officially as standard equipment. The word standard is perhaps the greatest transformation a radical idea can undergo. Arthur Sicard died on September 13, 1946. He was 69 years old. He had lived long enough to watch impossible become standard, long enough to see the word genius beginning to form around his name, though he likely never used it himself. Montreal named a street after him. Rue Sicard, a city that had once paid $13,000 for his impossible machine, now gave him something of permanent value, a name on a map, a place in the geography of the city he had helped keep moving. The engineers who had called it impossible are not named in history. They are not on any map. They left no streets. They wrote reports that were read, filed, and eventually destroyed by time. Their certainty outlasted them by exactly one demonstration. In 1995, nearly 50 years after his death, Canada Post issued a commemorative stamp bearing his image. The country's postal service, the institution that carries the official correspondence of a nation, chose Arthur Sicard as someone worth remembering, worth celebrating, worth carrying forward. Today, Group Sicard SSY Incorporate still exists. still manufactures. The company founded by the man engineers called Wrong has become the industry that engineers now study. The impossible machine is the machine that all subsequent machines are measured against. Consider the mathematics of what happened here. 1896, impossible. 1927, essential. 1930s, revolutionary. 1940s, standard. 1946, genius. 1995, legendary. Each word is the same machine. Each word is a different audience. Each word is a different moment of proof. What changed between 1896 and 1927 was not the machine. The machine was the machine. What changed was evidence. One demonstration: 90 feet of snow thrown through a Montreal blizzard in front of people with the authority to say, "We were wrong." This works. Here is what the story of Arthur Sicard actually teaches. Not about invention, but about the word impossible. And that word is not a technical judgment, it is a temporal one. It means not yet proven, not cannot be done. The difference is everything. 31 years is a long time to refuse a word. Most people accept impossible within the first few rejections. They find reasonable explanations. They call it pragmatism. They move on to something else. Sicard did not move on. He moved forward, into the snow, again. The gap between impossible and genius is not talent, it is not luck, it is not timing, though timing matters. The gap is precisely this: a working machine and the refusal to accept any other outcome until you had one. Sicard had both. Eventually. Same machine, different labels. This is the formula, not inspiration, not genius, not a moment of discovery. The formula is endurance meeting proof. When those two things arrive together in the same place, in front of the right witnesses, the label always changes. Before they called it genius, they called it impossible. The separation between those two words is Arthur Sicard's entire story. And it is, in the most specific and unmistakable sense, a blueprint, not for snow removal, for refusal, for the decision not to accept the first verdict. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. It is a small action, but it ensures these stories continue to exist if you want to directly support the creation of future documentaries. Super thanks is available below. And write in the comments, where are you watching from? Had you heard this story before? This is how impossible becomes genius. Not through a single moment of inspiration, not through luck or perfect timing or the right connections, through work, through winter, through $40,000 of private savings and 31 years of showing up in the cold and refusing, stubbornly, methodically, quietly, to stop. Stubbornly,